The Nigerian democracy, it is at the verge of collapse. That's really only those who pretend that it's not about to collapse. And it won't just collapse. The nation might as well collapse with it. Anybody who has eyes to see, whose eyes have not been blinded by greed or over-involvement in the politics of this country, by now knows that there is a deepening loss of confidence in the electoral ballot or the ballot system or electoral system to help change government. The last election almost forecloses the possibility that with the current INEC, with the current structure and the current judicial setup, many people, many reasonable people would argue that there's no chance of removing a government that is not performing in 2027. And so I think that even if it was very urgent in 2022-2023 to fight for electoral reform, it's actually more urgent now that there should be a coalition of civil society and political parties, especially opposition political parties, to take seriously the demand of real, not peripheral, real electoral reform. We're going to share our thoughts about what that real electoral reform means in a second. But let me say that the real point for us is Nigeria does not have all the options available to it. That's for real. Anybody tell you that we have is joking. If you watch the political events in the last couple of weeks, and if you also read the Guardian newspaper editorial of 2 days ago that the presidency reacted sharply to, what it points to is the fact that there is now, and there should be now, serious concern about the safety of our democracy. No matter where it happened, if citizens can block military vehicle and be urging for military takeover, the truth is the only attraction of democracy is that twofold. One, that democracy provides incentive for good performance. So democracy, through its peculiar incentive that people in office can be removed, help them to focus on promoting the well-being of citizens. So democracy's only merit, or two of its merits, is that somehow, through that mechanism, it can create good outcomes. The second merit of democracy is that democracy can stabilize a polity. So if people are disputing on the right to govern and have free and fair process, then they will not invest in self-help and violence. They will invest in strategy to convince the people to keep an eye on the governing elite, to criticize them, so that they too will replace them through peaceful process. And that's what the Constitution talks about, democratic, that nobody should take over power except by democraticness. So if elections are no longer free and fair, if there's no longer confidence that the electoral system can allow you to change government peacefully, what will happen? Citizens will resort to unconstitutional means of getting to power. It's simple. And we can't close our eyes to what's happening across the West African continent. That we are surrounded by countries that failed to have free and fair election, and the result was military rule. That's a fact. That's a fact. That's what happened in Burkina Faso. That's what happened in Niger. That's what happened in Mali. That's what happened in Guinea at some point. The moment nobody has confidence in the electoral system, then it's a matter of when before democracy is uprooted. We talk about judicial management of electoral disputes. We have come to a point where we have to acknowledge that part of the crisis of the electoral system is now residing with the courts. And there are three areas we want to look at. Of course, judicial corruption is bigger than us. is an elephant in the room. It won't be solved through electoral reform. It has to be solved through a comprehensive reform of the judiciary. There's no question around judicial corruption. But we are more concerned with jurisprudence of election. And two areas. First, I think that those who drafted the rules of petition, electoral petition rules, made a mistake. They should align those procedures to the Evidence Act. We have seen cases where, for example, you ask somebody to front load all evidence, he's going to use all the everything, and he has 12 days after election to go and file the petition. And INEC will not give him the documents. If he doesn't file it, no case. He goes and files it, and it turns out that maybe after filing it, the court gives an order asking that INEC should produce report. INEC produce it, the court receive it, and then they said, no, it was not filed before. What kind of nonsense is that? A court ordered evidence, and the evidence came. That was the case of Kogi. So there's no need to realign the evidence procedure for election cases. Elections are like any other cases. There should be no reason why courts should overlook clear evidence of electoral malpractices under a very perverse technical rule. Secondly, judicial officers should issue judicial directions. Why should you have INEC, IREV? Results on IREV shows collected in real time, shows that this party scored 4%. IREV is supposed to be, as the court said, Supreme Court says, oh, IREV is not a collection system, but that's true. But what's the IREV? IREV is a system that gives you proof of actual counting, because they count at the polling unit, they sign off, is that also, and upload. Collection then happens, and somehow you overlook the real-time capture of the actual result and use the many hours, many days collation with alterations and mutilations on paper. I have not seen where that happens. Now think about elections even in India, a bigger than us. In a day, results are out. It's electronically transmitted, real time. People know the result. In the US today, maybe how the result will go, we don't know. It may be midday, before 10 hours, before 5 hours voting started, they will declare result. There's no magic about this. How can you overlook the result captured real time, and then you allow results captured hours after with biro? I have never seen something like that. So I think there's need for judicial direction that says, look, the whole essence of election petition is to restore credibility back to voters. It's not for judges to do fanciful sorcery to declare winner or no winner. It's simply for the courts to say, get us back to where the voters voted. It's not the court who elect candidates. So there must be the need now for judicial officers, the Chief Justice of the Federation, or the Federal Court, or the Court of Appeal, to issue the right directives to judges. Your job, you can't see the clear, if you see clear result, that's what it is. And the reason IRF should, by law, be made to be determinative. Results are collected from polling units, they are posted, and that's the result. There's no ritual of, imagine what's called collection. People will now carry with leg, go to local government capital, go to state capital. You go to five stages, then finally somebody will count it, decide whether he will accept or not, and then will declare whatever he likes. Then 2 days, 4 days after, INEC starts reposting IRF. I mean, that's ridiculous. In the election today, results finished, they are still changing IRF. They're changing IRF. So what mockery is this? So I think this is now time to deal with this once and for all. And don't forget where we're starting from. Anybody deceiving you that this country is not at the verge of collapse is a joker. Any country who says that if we continue this election to 2027, we will remain a country is joking. I can tell you that, you know, there's something that happened in the Bible, some of us who are Christians. It says, Jesus was telling, it says, if the things that were done, we were doing, it's not enough, it's not what was done in Sodom and Gomorrah. That they were wiped off. So how dare you think you will survive? The things that made Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger collapse are not more than what we are doing today to ourselves. So somehow we wish that if we issue a press statement, we will divert the tragedy. That is wrong. The final, no, go back. So we talk about judicial management. And again, that's another one I missed out, is around, so the final point we wanted to talk about is, apart from INEC, yes, we talk about the primary process, and then, just 1 second to get, so yes, then electoral finance, I didn't mention about campaign finance. Abuja School went to court and got an order that INEC should issue directives for campaign finance. We saw the debate over Aisha Yusuf and the Labour Party, whether their records are good or not. Now, these confusions abide because there's no guideline, comprehensive guideline for campaign finance. We are taken with INEC. We won the case at the High Court. INEC has no guideline. INEC is doing nothing. INEC is only doing election. The day of election, they rig it and go home and call civil society again to talk about planning for the next one. Everything they ought to do, they never do. INEC is not just corrupt, it's incompetent, thoroughly. How can you have a law? The Constitution says that illicit funds, campaign finance from outside will not come to the country, number one. Number two, Electoral Act talks about limits, individual contribution and spend. Still, INEC has no process to ask parties to keep accounts. Now look at what happens elsewhere. Before you declare as a candidate in the US, for example, when you declare, every moment you issue a statement, how much you have received, how much you have spent. Now, how do you know money laundering? How do we track criminals who are investing in election? Okay, how do we even track money used to bribe officials? So you hear every year that to run for Senate in Nigeria, you need 10 billion. People tell you to run for. That 10 billion is not spent on the media, it's not spent on logistics, it's not spent. This is money perhaps used to corrupt public officials for electoral purposes. How can you track it if you don't have a comprehensive reporting mechanism?